Hey everybody, my name's Spunky, and today I'm going to be doing the Draw My Life video. Now, I'm not the best artist, but I'm going to try my best. So, it all started about 24 years ago in this little RV camper in the middle of Oklahoma. And there was this guy and this girl in the back, and they were making the birds and bees, and well, you know the rest. Well, before I was actually born, the doctors said that I would come out with really short legs and arms and never grow properly. But being my spunky self, I had to prove them wrong, and I came out totally normal. Well, okay, maybe I'm not totally normal, but I'm definitely not short. We actually lived in Florida, and we had a big house, and the thing I loved about the house was it had this really long driveway. And I remember one year I got one of the very first big wheels, and it was pink and yellow, and I loved it. For the most part, when I was little, I played by myself outside a lot. I had imaginary friends, but mostly I climbed the trees. What was really cool was my dad got to fly airplanes. He was in the United States Air Force, and he got to fly all around the world. And he got to see lots of cool places like China and Tokyo, and he was gone a lot, but every time he came home, he always brought me special gifts, and it was always a really big event for me, so I always loved when he came home. My mom missed my dad a lot, but she always tried to make things happy for me, and one of the best parts about him being gone was whenever he wasn't there, I always got to sleep in the really big bed with her, and that was pretty cool. Now, I had an older half-sister, but I don't really have very many memories living with her. Her real mom lived up in Texas, and she spent a lot of time flying back and forth between the two. Unfortunately, in 2010, I was about 10 years old, my mom and my dad started fighting a lot, and they would yell and scream, and I remember one time they got so loud that I got scared, and I ended up running outside and calling 911. Shortly after, they ended up getting a divorce, and my dad was left alone with the house, and I left with my mom. And we ended up moving into an apartment complex. We had a lot of fun there, and my mom even let me throw this super awesome Halloween party. During that time, my mom got a new fiance named James, and he was the very first person I'd ever met with red hair, and I thought that was pretty cool. The three of us had a lot of fun, and we got along really well. He was always smiling, and he was always trying to make me laugh, and I liked him a lot. But I guess James wasn't as happy as we thought he was. And shortly after, he passed away in a pretty tragic way. His death left us pretty broken, and my mom was really upset. I was still kind of little, so she didn't really tell me much of the details. But in order to keep this video light, I'm not going to talk anymore about that. But my mom wasn't the only one finding a new lover. My dad ended up remarrying to this really nice lady. She was sweet, but she was kind of loony. But she happened to be the mom of my very best friend at the time named Megan. And she had a sister as well, so I ended up gaining two new sisters. In the beginning, Megan and I had so much fun. I remember one summer we laughed so hard in the backyard that we actually peed our pants. We ended up peeing ourselves like 3 times laughing so hard we kept having to change pants, and it was really silly and embarrassing. But one thing I know about growing up is that people change, and Megan started changing. She made these new friends, and they were really snooty, so we'll give them big noses, and she never really liked to talk to me anymore, and that made me really sad. And meanwhile, my dad's new wife was getting loonier and loonier, and she ended up throwing my cats that I'd had since I was really little outside. I was really, really mad about that. And she did all these crazy new projects on the house, and she kept changing it, and before I knew it, I couldn't even recognize it as my old home. Eventually, they divorced, and they went away. I was still pretty mad at my dad at the time, but I was still really close with my mom. In fact, she was my best friend, and we were pretty much inseparable. I may have lost my stepsisters, but when I started high school, I gained 2 new best friends. There was this really tall girl named Brittany, and this really short redhead named Kaylee, and I fit in the middle of them perfectly. We pretty much became a best friend trio. Then one day when I came home from school, my dad and her new boyfriend at the time were on the couch, and they were all like, "Surprise! You have a new baby brother." And at first I thought it was a joke, but they were actually serious, and it turns out we had adopted a little baby boy, and I was so happy. I was so happy. Eventually, my mom decided to go ahead and tie the knot with her new boyfriend. We'll just call him douchebag. And we ended up moving around a lot. We went from an apartment to a trailer to a house to a cottage, and in a few short years, we'd ended up moving like 7 times or something crazy like that. My new stepdad, douchebag at the time, happened to be not so nice person. He turned out to be an alcoholic, and he had anger management issues, and he was bipolar, and just a whole list of bad stuff. So he became really violent, and I remember holidays were usually the worst. I remember one Christmas I ended up running away with my baby brother, and he was always breaking things and smashing up the house, and over time my mom started having these bruises everywhere, and it was just not a pretty picture. Needless to say, all the issues at home started to affect me. My grades in school dropped. I developed really low self-esteem, and I thought I was fat. I became obsessed with being skinny, and I stopped eating for a short time. Unfortunately, I started cutting. All these things ended up making me have to withdraw from high school, and I was really upset about that. My dad was really worried about me, and my mom, and even my older sister was worried about me. But I was too depressed to really see that. Eventually, my mom did end up getting rid of the douchebag, but it pretty much left our little family kind of broken, and broke as well, as in we had no money. We were pretty much borderline homeless, and my mom ended up taking my baby brother and moving into my sister's house, and she lived with her and her husband and her 2 kids and this other guy, and it was a really crowded house, and there wasn't any room for me. I ended up having to move into my dad's house with his new wife, and they were really happy to have me, but I was really scared, and I missed my mom and my baby brother, so I had a really hard time at first. But as it turns out, it happened to be probably one of the best things that's ever happened to me. I became really close with my dad, and he also helped me build my confidence. Oh, yeah, you remember that other guy at my sister's house? I actually ended up dating him. It was my first taste of love and a real relationship, but he ended up disappearing, and I do mean disappearing. He just kind of vanished, and he never said goodbye. So for a long time, I would always stare out the window and hope that his little blue car would show up. It never showed up, and he never did come back. I ended up working at this pizza place where I met this really funny guy, and when I asked what his name was, he said it was Elvis. And well, I believed him, so we're going to give him Scoopy Elvis here. He really liked me, and he would always flirt with me, and he asked me out a lot. But I was still kind of shook up from losing my last boyfriend, so I said no quite a few times. But he didn't give up, and eventually I said yes. And I'm really glad I did, because I ended up falling in love with him. Having a stable home and my newfound confidence, supportive parents, and a new awesome boyfriend, I was able to graduate and even continue my education. I ended up getting into the University of South Florida, which I was really happy about. And while I was there, I learned about this really awesome thing called feminism. And I sort of became obsessed with it, so I majored in women's and gender studies. And in August this year, I graduated. So now, 5 years later, I'm still in love with that Elvis guy. He happened to be the best thing that's ever happened to me. And even though right now it's kind of tough, and I don't have a job, and we don't have much money, I try to stay positive. So after years of watching YouTube, I finally decided it's time for me to start making videos too. Oh, and you remember that really tall girl and the little redhead that I mentioned from high school? They're still my best friends, and I still get to hang out with them, which is pretty awesome. I still get to see my mom and baby brother a lot, and he happens to love his big sister. And, well, that's pretty much my life in a nutshell. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay tuned.